Hi everyone, good afternoon. So before we start, please be informed that the speeches will be made in English or in French. So if you need translation, please use the headphones that are available on each seat. I will now give the floor to our Master of Ceremonies, Omar Lebrun. Thank you.
Excellencies, distinguished delegates, and dear friends, I am Omar Lebrun, your Master of Ceremony. I would like to welcome you all in this assembly. I would like to also give a very special recognition to the children and young people in the audience today. And I would like to invite them and the rest of the audience to join our Twitter conversation today using the hashtags #EndPoverty and #StopPoverty, as well as a special thanks to Playing for Change for the extraordinary collaborative video defying distances and creeds in the spirit of unity. Thank you. One more note before we begin. This is a two-part celebration commemorating our solemn commitment to end poverty. After having listened to the delegates and activists here in this room, a moment of reflection will take place in the United Nations Garden. At 2:15 p.m., I will kindly ask you to move quickly to the garden where the stone representing the call to action stands. At the stone, we will walk in the footsteps of a whole generation of human rights defenders who gathered around the stone in Paris exactly 30 years ago, as we will gather around it today. Standing together on October 17, 1987, 100,000 people congregated to pledge their commitment to achieve human rights in partnership with those living in extreme poverty. Father Joseph Rosinsky launched his call to action 30 years ago. His vision is still alive and resonates today in the United Nations as a collective goal and moral duty. That message stands as a landmark here in the United Nations Garden, where a replica of the commemorative stone was unveiled in 1996. Inspired by the first call to action, the United Nations adopted October 17th as the International Day for the Eradication of Poverty in 1992. Today, 25 years have passed since this recognition of this day. October 17th, 2017 is a special day, my good friends. This year's theme is answering the call of October 17th to end poverty, a path towards peaceful and inclusive societies. It echoes strongly with the sustainable goals here at the United Nations. Please give your attention to the screen as we will enter in our spirit of togetherness with the engaging video of ATD Fourth World Global Campaign Stop Poverty. So as we continue with the technical difficulty that we're having,
Sueño con un mundo liberado de la pobreza.
Naniniwala ako sa mundo na walang kahirapan.
Je rêve d'un monde sans pauvreté.
Ik geloof in een wereld zonder armoede.
Wierzę w świat bez ubóstwa.
En 2017, nous menons une campagne mondiale de mobilisation intitulée Stop Poverty.
In 2017, we organized a complete campaign on ending poverty.
Este año marcará el centenario del nacimiento de Joseph Brzezinski, fundador de ATD Fourth World, un hombre que nació en un campo de detención de refugiados.
Je ne proposais pas du tout une action de charité.
My idea was not just to, it was not just a matter of, giving, it's just, reflecting what I had suffered mostly in my youth.
ATD Fourth World, the organization founded by Joseph Brzezinski and a group of families living in a shanty town outside Paris in the 1950s.
ATD Fourth World is like one big family. They're like family.
ATD, c'est une deuxième famille. Sans ATD, je serais pas là.
Le 17 octobre 2017 sera la 30e journée mondiale du refus de la misère. Une journée où chaque année, les hommes et les femmes qui luttent contre la pauvreté dans le monde entier se rassemblent et partagent leurs expériences.
We move, move forward little by little, and there's still a lot that needs to be done. Today we see a project that, are being implemented in our community without asking for our point of view.
Sugpuin ang kahirapan.
Pobreza nunca más.
Stop poverty! Stop poverty!
Très bien, alors vous m'arrêtez pas après, hein.
Thank you so much for this video. It illustrates how coming together to stop poverty has no frontiers and no boundaries. And now to continue, I have the esteemed honor to invite you to listen to a message of the United Nations Secretary General, His Excellency, Mr. Antonio Guterres, via video presentation.
Hello, everyone. Today, we stand in solidarity with 800 million people around the world who live in extreme poverty. Many more are threatened by alarming high rates of unemployment, insecurity, inequality, conflict, and the effects of climate change. But we have made remarkable progress on eradicating poverty since 1990. And all countries have recommitted to fighting poverty and exclusion everywhere. The 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development is our plan to take a different course. And this globally agreed agenda pledges to secure a healthy planet and build peaceful, inclusive societies to ensure lives of dignity for all. Its pledge to leave no one behind will require innovative approaches, partnerships, and solutions. And that means addressing the root causes of poverty in order to eradicate it entirely. It means listening to the views and guidance of people living in poverty and acting together with them. Let us join hands to stop poverty, all together in dignity. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Antonio Guterres, for your message of hope, strength, and togetherness. We truly appreciate your commitment to join us to honor the lives and efforts of those living in extreme poverty. We hope that the messages that will be heard today will continually inspire your daily work. Thank you. I am pleased to welcome Mr. Achim Steiner, United Nations Development Program Administrator.
Omar, thank you very much. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, dear visitors to the United Nations who perhaps for the first time are here today, I want to extend a very warm welcome on behalf of our colleagues in the United Nations Secretariat, our specialized agencies and programs and funds, all of whom, as you know, have at the heart of their mission, in one form or another, the eradication of poverty. So for us to be here together with you today to celebrate this 17th of October, a day when 30 years ago, courageous people got up and said that the conversation about poverty, but let's also say about wealth, about inequality, about fundamental rights, is a conversation that should not only be transacted by those who happen to have access to a hall such as this one. And I think the symbolism of having many of you here in the United Nations headquarters today to commemorate this 25th anniversary of the International Day for the Eradication of Poverty, and to have you here as an expression of solidarity, first of all, with those who cannot be here today, who may never set foot into this particular building, but through you actually have their voice being brought here today. You know, and you have probably, because you are here, had contact with some of us who work in the United Nations family, whether it's the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights, whether it is the post that I hold, the Administrator of the United Nations Development Programme, the head of UNICEF, the Director General of the World Health Organization, just to mention a few of our sister agencies who are bound by decisions of your governments who come together in the United Nations to make poverty eradication the central goal of the development work of the United Nations. Nevertheless, we know that in many respects that goal of eradicating poverty is still an elusive one. But I'm sometimes troubled also because when we speak to people across the world and talk about poverty, we forget how many hundreds of millions of people have actually been able to escape poverty. And that development works, that activism works, that your voice, when you raise it in your community, in your political system, with governments, with local governments, but also with citizens in society, can make a difference. And so the distance where sometimes a single voice, like that of Father Wyszynski, began a long, long time ago, it can actually light up a whole movement. I often quote a person that I got to know when she was already a very famous person, a woman called Wangari Maathai, a Kenyan woman who got the Nobel Peace Prize, but actually started off as a girl in a village in Kenya and decided at her young age to go out and essentially mobilize women to plant trees to create both opportunity and harmony in her community and address environmental change. 35 years later, she was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize. So as we celebrate this day here today, it is not to sit back and relax, but it is also to recognize that there are millions of people who have made a difference. And that in being here today and in many other places across the world, by celebrating this day, what we're really saying is the work is not done, but you have friends, you have allies, and the United Nations family is certainly amongst them. Once again, welcome and thank you for all your effort that you have made to be here, to make this day so special, and hopefully to reach ever more people that can join in a chorus that say poverty is not something that we cannot change. Indeed, we are changing it. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Steiner, for presenting such a profound message filled with support and awareness regarding those who live in extreme poverty. The collective spirit of humanity is at stake. Safeguarding human rights is not only our mandated obligation, but it is also our collective responsibility. Mr. Steiner, thank you. Now we will listen to a message from Mr. Seamus Neville. Even in the harshest of struggles, Mr. Neville has persevered as an activist and human rights defender for himself, his family, and his community. Mr. Seamus Neville.
Che mi ne falta to all the world. This is an Irish Celtic for human 100,000 welcomes. My name is Seamus Neville. I am from Ireland, and this is my first time here in New York. I'm a long-time activist with ATD Fourth World movement, and as an activist, I fight for human rights. We, the poor people in the world, have only one voice. We all have the same goal, and that goal is to stop poverty once and for all throughout the world. I would like to see a brighter future for families who are struggling in poverty, to finally see families being able to bring up their own children because they are respected. Families around the world are abused by the system because they are poor. I helped my wife to deliver one of my children. This is amazing. For a father to help in his son's birth, and I feel very proud. But unfortunately, my son was taken into care, and then my eldest daughter was put up for adoption. I felt guilty for what happened. I just broke down outside the court. I felt guilty for being a parent. I know I did everything right, but nothing you do is right in their eyes, and it makes you feel less than human. To wake up every single day without your children makes you feel there's a gap in your life. When children are taken into care, parents grieve for their lives. Even the children are alive. I felt like a failure when my children were taken into care. A failure as a father. Also, my daughter was put up for adoption. I was allowed to send her cards only twice a year, but she told me that she never got them. Everywhere in the world, extreme poverty separates children from their families. As families who have been abused by the system, we need to stand up and join our voices and say, enough is enough. Coming together gives us the strength to fight for our rights. We may be poor, but we are rich in knowledge. All we ask is to be respected, to be treated the same way as others people. We do need to treat one another with respect and dignity. Today, in many European, Asian, African, and Latin America countries, in Great Britain, and here in the United States, we, the poor people, living in poverty, conduct training programs to teach social workers, teachers, and citizens about what we know, what families like ours experience. For me, it means that I put on a front to hide my suffering. I hide my pain when I work with those professionals, and I get my strength from other families struggling as I am. Our goal is to make professionals practice and behavior change and to ensure that our own knowledge is taken into account. Fighting for human rights, dignity, and justice is a long battle, but we will overcome for the sake of our children. The time has come for us all to say to our governments, not to take away our parenting rights away from us. Thank you.
Thank you, Seamus, for your message and for your commitment to participate where voices like yours need to be heard to build peace and foster our common humanity. Thank you. At this moment, we will listen to a musical interlude as we have the pleasure of having classical guitarist and composer, Mr. Ty Austin, with us. I invite you all to listen to his beautiful music and reflect on the messages already filling our room today. Thank you, Mr. Austin. We will now listen to a statement by Mr. Alex Begay, an activist leading the example of parenting and unwavering desire to achieve stability and success for his family while encouraging other families never to give up.
Yate she Alex Begay in a share. The net and shle. She done a tenjikine twidik onje bushes chin. Kia ani a dashanale. Hello, my name is Alex Begay. I'm a proud citizen of the Navajo Nation. I am from Gallup, New Mexico. My mother's clan is Honeycomb Rock. My father's clan is Bitterwater. My paternal grandfather's clan is Towering House. I grew up in poverty all my life. My mother passed on when I was very young, and I have no memory of her. My siblings and I were placed in foster care. My father remarried and got us back when I was 10 years old. But soon after, he was incarcerated, and we were placed in the care of my stepmother. I love her like my own birth mother. She had to work 2 jobs to support us, and it was difficult for her to have us all together at once. So she placed half of us in boarding school. I was 13 and stayed there until I was 17 years old. In high school, I would be bothered by other people getting picked on or harassed, so I would stick up for them. I would make my way to become someone's friend because they might need help. Sometimes I would go to a friend's house and ask if they want to hang out. I would be invited in to warm up. Just out of love and consideration, I would be asked if I were hungry or thirsty. And they would show me hospitality. In my culture, that is a way of respect. Even being called Shiyeje, my little one, has a lot of meaning. I like that feeling of being accepted. Now I return that kindness to others, even a stranger who might have gotten kicked out or lost their family. It saddens me when people get ignored. Most people would say, get a job, when there's not really much jobs available, or your background is not suitable for a job. I know how it is. That's why Lucretia and I would pass out sandwiches in the alleys if people were hungry. The little that we had, we offered to share. I understand how it feels to have nothing. That's just my way of giving back to my community. Lucretia is my companion, and we have 2 children. Life is still very hard. Even working minimum wage isn't enough to save up to rent an apartment. We lived in motels, we stayed with relatives and friends, but it was overcrowded. You have to be married to be together in one room in a shelter. We did not want to be separated. It should just be about families that want to stay together. We were trying to seek help. There were a lot of barriers that made it complicated. We needed hospital records, background checks, immunizations. There was always a waiting list. We would get approved but wait a couple weeks or months to get help when we desperately needed the help right then and there. Then we moved to Lucretia's grandparents' house far from town. It's a 1-bedroom house with no electricity or running water. The flooring was incomplete, but still it was something grand to us. We finally had a place to call home. It was good for a couple of months, but we didn't feel safe there. I tried to give that sense of peace and security to my children, even though the environment we lived in wasn't safe. My family met ATD Fourth World at the Story Garden, a weekly program for children and families to share learning experiences like reading and doing activities. We came with a story of our own. I noticed that my life is somewhat like a garden itself. As parents, Lucretia and I were the soil of the garden. We had to break the ground and get the rocks out of the soil in our lives before we could plant our seed, which are my children. I really want my kids to learn and grow even though we are going through hardships and hard times. It takes a lot of patience, nurturing, and responsibility to care for a garden. We had to maintain the sunlight and water in order for our garden to grow. We must remove the weeds to make us stronger so our garden will bloom and blossom. We are all people, no matter our ethnicity. Everyone struggles, whether you live in a reservation or in the big city. I want to encourage other families to stay strong. We are struggling to live up to our hopes, hoping for peace. Thank you. Ahiaha.
Alex, thank you so much for sharing your hopes, courage, and ambition. Family is the core of our lives, and through your unbelievable strength, you inspire us all. We will now listen to the message from Ms. Angelique Jean. Angelique is a human rights activist. I am inviting you to witness her courage to stand against humiliation in the face of the injustice of poverty. Ms. Angelique.
Bonjour.
Hello. My name is Angelique, and I come from France. I have 5 children. At some point in my life, because of the poverty and my isolation, social services took my children away. After ruling, I was an unfit mother. No one offered support, trying to understand my situation. I was judged, humiliated, and condemned to live without my children. From the very beginning, we don't have the same opportunities in life. Even at a young age, our children see the harshness of our lives. To help us, they take on responsibilities that are not theirs to bear as children. They want to protect us, even though it's not their role. At home, sometime, when I was completely drained and I couldn't keep up with everyday tasks, sometimes my children also had to go to school with an empty stomach because there wasn't much at home. But my children never talked about it. They never spoke of that for fear of being judged by other people. When I was a child, I did the same thing. I wanted to protect my parents. I remember arriving at school in the morning and the teacher forcing my older sister to wash. She said she smelled bad, and she did that in front of everybody. The teacher pulled my hair and humiliated me, saying that my family name was disreputable. We never said a word about that to our parents because we didn't want them to suffer even more. In our neighborhoods, poverty makes children mature way too quickly, and their lives are marked forever about that. This is deeply unjust. There's no place anywhere for our children to speak about their lives without fearing that their families will be judged. Living with no money in substandard housing, despairing of finding any work, dropping out of school, often without knowing how to read and write, and with no job training, added to the fact that many of us as children have been removed from our families. That's a violence of extreme poverty. In order to survive, we're forced to ask for help, and we depend on charitable organizations to eat, to find housing, to have what we need for our children. This is not what we want. When we have little or no money, we're victims of discrimination, we're humiliated, we're ignored, we're even treated like children sometimes. We're forced into dependency. Living in extreme poverty, we hear a lot of lectures, people want to coach us, tell us what to do, what not to do. We end up feeling ashamed of ourselves. We suffer these humiliations by gritting our teeth in front of people who are supposed to help us. People think that we're not smart, that we have no intelligence, that we are worthless, that we can't bring up our children. They don't expect anything from us. So any decisions affecting us are taken without talking to us, without consulting us, without taking into account our experience, our strength, our willpower, and our desire to build a more just world. Will you get to know us and acknowledge us? Aren't we human beings like you? Enough is enough. We're not guilty. We're not to be blamed. Therefore, we are people who resist and who want to build peace. Our experiences, our life experiences, have prepared us to do that. We are standing on our 2 feet. And what I want for myself, I want it for every person in the world. All of us need to commit ourselves not to look down on anyone, not to leave anyone behind, not to leave anyone alone in extreme poverty. We can rest only when extreme poverty is overcome, then everyone, everywhere will be able to live in peace. Together with you, that's what we want to help build. Thank you.
For sharing your insightful message. Even in the deepest distress, people like you strive to protect their dignity and to connect with others. Thank you. Let us now listen to another wonderful musical interlude by Mr. Ty Austin while reflecting on the idea of respect and dignity to one another. Thank you, Ty, for sharing so generously your time and your talents. Thank you very much. We will now listen to a joint message by Mr. Adrien Delva from Haiti and Mr. Mamadou Kone from Mali.
My name is Louis Adrien Delva, and I come from Haiti. I first learned about extreme poverty when I was in secondary school. As you know, Asian society is very stratified. People from different walks of life sometimes never meet one another, but I was part of a catechism group in my college, and together, often on Friday afternoons, we would visit people who lived in very difficult conditions. I had seen poverty before in the streets, but now I learned and discovered extreme poverty in neighborhoods where I would never have gone without specifically wanting to meet the people who lived there. Today, I realize that there are still people living in poverty and people living in extreme poverty. Now, when here at the United Nations we speak of the eradication of poverty, that's fine. But in Haiti, people, what is important is that people in Haiti hear that their efforts, these efforts to seek peace will continue. When Joseph Brzezinski launched ATD Fourth World movement, he wanted to initiate an approach to reach people who are living in poverty and are left behind. He asked other people to join him. I answered his call starting from when I was a child. I still remember running to see the books that ATD volunteer brought to my neighborhoods in Boaké. When I was a student in Mali, I wanted to offer children the same opportunity to satisfy their desire to learn together. We started a library under mango trees later. After I completed my studies, I chose to make a long-term commitment to follow Joseph Brzezinski's path. And since then, like others and with others, I seek out the most tired, abandoned people and help them find their place in our society. I pursue this commitment around the world like a calling that leads me to intelligence and courage of families who are often left behind. Everywhere in the world, children are separated from their families because of extreme poverty. In Burkina Faso, I met Dramane, a child living in the streets of Ouagadougou, and after 2 years working with him and with ATD, he tried to reconnect with his family. His father lived alone in isolation. He had been banned from his village because his son had left without giving any explanation. After Dramane started visiting his father, a path gradually materialized in the bush between the village and his father's place, and soon other members of the community began using the path. Dramane's path had become everyone's path. With pride, his father could use it to reach the village. It seemed a path of links, of sharing, and of solidarity, a path to belonging to a community. Joseph Brzezinski made a promise that one of these paths would lead here to the United Nations, so that, in turn, the United Nations could also take this path. Haiti is my home. I don't have to force myself to stay there. I made the choice to remain in my country. I'm not the only one. Some stay because they are privileged and they take advantage of it. Me, I stay because it is a place where I feel I can be myself and where I feel best. I believe that as a citizen, I can do something. I can contribute in the context of my country's very difficult situation and history. But we try to make progress first individually and then collectively. I believe as a citizen that I can support the efforts of families who live in great hardship to help them rediscover their sense of dignity. I have a personal history with families who live in poverty. It started back in 1991. I thought I could imagine anything, that anything was possible. When I first met them, their situation felt overwhelming. What I saw and what I heard was beyond my understanding. This is why I made a commitment to them. My point of reference is families who live in poverty. When I'm among them and when we interact in a friendly way, we're going forward. Me, them. It's taking a step in the right direction. And when these families find in me someone who can, be an echo to their concern, we're taking a second step. What bothers me the most today is that these families are making a lot of effort. They're working really hard and they are getting increasingly poorer. That worries me deeply. Extreme poverty dehumanizes people. And it's up to people to find a solution and to recognize one another as brothers and sisters. In meeting with families facing the violence of poverty in Burkina Faso as in Haiti, we realize how lucky we are to be able to make free choices. Today we understand that our freedom allows us to make a commitment to the hopes of Angelique, Seamus, Alex, and so many throughout the world. enough is enough. We have to be together and say stop. These people have helped us understand that the search for our own humanity is not a personal issue but a collective one. Our humanity has the same foundation, our common dignity. And here at the United Nations, we still need to learn how to create paths that will enable each person to feel part of a human community. And there's one place where we can learn this. It is among those families who live in extreme poverty. They know the meaning and the value of belonging to this human community, all the more because it is constantly denied to them. In today's world, where no one can
I'd like to welcome His Excellency, Mr. Santiago Eric Tiarre, Ambassador of the Permanent Representative of Burkina Faso to the United Nations. The mission, on behalf of Burkina Faso, is as a dedicated defender of equality and dignity of all human beings. They also are the co-sponsor, along with the Mission of France, on this International Day for the Eradication of Poverty. Please, Mr. Ambassador.
J'avoue que c'est pas simple.
I admit that it's not easy to follow activists with such strong voices. It's a change of pace, but I'm going to say a few words that I've prepared. Because poverty knocks on all doors in all countries of the world. The importance of this day that we're commemorating today is demonstrated because eliminating poverty is at the heart of the Sustainable Development Agenda. And we have to recognize that this battle is far from being won. Who would have believed that today, in this century, so many people would still be suffering from injustice and famine everywhere in the world? But fundamentally, poverty is not just a question of a lack of income or resources, as some of the activists said. It handicaps the individual, both on a material and moral level, because it means that the person is unable to take care of himself, to get education, to have housing, and be dressed and be fed. But what is most painful is not just the lack of resources, it's the lack of respect, it's the disdain that people show. And as many countries, Burkina Faso is commemorating this day, and our Minister of Economics, Finance, and Development made a declaration that I'd like to share with you, because it summarizes the come out of Burkina Faso to eliminate poverty. And it mentions the measures to be taken to eliminate poverty and how the government needs to be committed. So I'll read you the declaration that was made today, October 17th, 2017, by our minister. I'm quoting, 17th October 2017 is the 25th anniversary of the commemoration of the International Day for the Elimination of Poverty, established by Resolution 47196 of 22nd of December 1992 of the United Nations. This year, the international community invites us to reflect on the theme answering the call of October 17th to end poverty, a path toward peaceful and inclusive societies. This theme reminds us of the importance of helping each citizen to recover his and her dignity, to promote solidarity, to work and live together, and to send out bridges to those of us in our society who are living in poverty. So the Sustainable Development Goals, the SDGs, list eliminating poverty in all forms everywhere in the world as the first goal. In Burkina Faso, more than 4 people out of 10 live below the threshold of poverty. And the president of Burkina Faso has shown commitment in fighting poverty and reducing disparities between and among regions. The government adopted the National Plan for Economic and Social Development, which will allow the incidence of poverty to fall below 35% by 2020. That is to say that it's currently above 35%. It's closer to 40%. So a certain number of key outcomes will be achieved. For example, doubling the share of added value in manufacturing industries in the GDP, and an increase on the secondary sector in the GDP to go from 20.1% to 22.4%, and a number of other achievements to help eliminate poverty. And the PADEL program, a program to support the development of local economies, was launched in November 2016 by the president, and aims to combat inequalities and exclusion, leading, which will then lead to the improvement of social well-being. And the implementation of the PADEL plan, which will cover the 13 regions of Burkina Faso up in 2020, will allow us to build local economies so that they're dynamic and prosperous and inclusive. So I'd like to reiterate the gratitude of the government towards our partners and the considerable actions undertaken to promote lasting human development. I also would like to pay homage to all the people who are unnamed, who are working behind on numerous projects. This International Day should allow us to eliminate poverty in all its forms. Our dreams will not be able to change the face of the world unless they're accompanied by actions. So let us eliminate poverty. Let us be committed. Thank you.
Again, we appreciate the continued support from Burkina Faso for the International Day for the Eradication of Poverty. I will now turn the floor over to His Excellency, Mr. François Delattre, Ambassador and Permanent Representative of France to the United Nations. Mr. Ambassador.
Ladies and gentlemen, dear friends, I'm going to speak in French as the ambassador from France. So I, as many people, have felt that this meeting is not just like any other meeting, because it has to do with essential things, as Eric said, as you've all said with your powerful testimony and engaging words. When we fight poverty, we're leading a battle that's the mother of all battles, because this fight against poverty is at the heart of the actions of the UN, as the Secretary General, Antonio Guterres, just said, because at the heart of this combat, we need respect towards each other and dignity. Those are at the heart of what you do, and they must be at the heart of what we do here at the UN. That's one of the lessons that you taught me as a representative of the team of ATD Fourth World. And also I wanted to say that this fight against poverty, this is something that it's something that you taught me. It's inseparable from the combat for peace. They're part of the same agenda, and they require the same generosity. So I'm very pleased with Hayat Zega and my team to be here. And it's something I'm so proud of. As a member of the UN team, to greet you here, because you bear our highest values, and it's with great pride that I am able to speak to you here as representative of France, and perhaps to add a French touch and be a proof of the great modesty of France that France is so well known for. But thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to speak here today. This meeting is not like other meetings, and it brings together people. Many people who are here are coming here for the very first time, and the representatives of ATD Fourth World are for all of us, and for me especially, a source of inspiration and deep admiration. And what I hope is that after our meeting, the message that you have expressed with great communicative strength, that this message will stay in the hearts of all those who work with and for the UN. So dignity, courage, respect, these are words that characterize you, that characterize ATD Fourth World, your personal experience of poverty, and support for people who have known poverty enlightened us in both meanings of the term. Your serenity, the deep convictions that you have that extreme poverty, it violates human rights, is something that is contagious and something that we need to learn from here at the UN. And I'm particularly touched by the peace and the serenity, if I may say, and the strength of your message. I've met you many times recently, and someone said recently that peace is not the opposite of war. Peace is the opposite of violence, all violence. And amongst these forms of violence, extreme poverty plays a role. So combating poverty is at the heart of our struggle, and we must hear the voices of people who have lived in extreme poverty. And so in order to listen to them, every year on 17th October, we meet here at the United Nations, like many other people do throughout the world, to affirm our combat against extreme poverty and the recognition of the dignity and the rights of all people affected by it. This 17th of October is particularly important because there are a number of anniversaries that we're commemorating. The 100th anniversary of the birth of Joseph Brzezinski, Father Brzezinski, who was the founder of ATD Fourth World, and the 30th anniversary of the day for the International Day to Combat Poverty, and it's 25 years that the UN have been recognizing the International Day for the Elimination of Poverty. So France plays an important part, and combating exclusion is a major priority of our policies, both in a general sense and in terms of all the countries that we represent, but also it's an effort, a requirement for solidarity and seeking greater cohesion socially. After implementing an ambitious program to fight poverty at every level, the French government has proposed additional guidelines to combat the exclusion of children and young people, and some of whom we've heard from. And one of our ambitions is to break the cycle of poverty, which often is transmitted from one generation to the next. We refuse, thanks to you, again, this fate, this inheritance of poverty. So the key word is to build together, hand in hand, a world with more brotherhood, more solidarity, more based around families and living places and workplaces, and culture and education are vital in order to overcome poverty. The President of France, during his statement to the General Assembly, spoke of the need to make fighting poverty a priority. And the Environment Compact is one of our major initiatives that Achim Steiner is very familiar with, is something that can help to contribute to this combat. Fighting extreme poverty also means helping people avoiding to fall into poverty following natural disasters, conflicts, and wars, and that supposes that we coordinate in a coherent way our efforts to guarantee peace and development policies while leaving no one behind. That's the key word that you also taught me. Anyone who's left behind is it's an admission of failure in what we have been doing, and we can't ever say that we have the perfect method of partnership to overcome poverty. We need to listen to each other and work together. And people who are working on this topic are real artisans of peace and must be recognized as such. And what I would like to say today is that we need to learn a lesson from ATD Fourth World and other representatives, and that's that it's by helping those who are the most fragile, who are the most vulnerable, that we can guarantee peace for all. So I'd like to commend the activists of ATD Fourth World, and I'm very moved by your efforts, and I believe that this meeting will be so important for our efforts. Thank you.
I guess you didn't.
Thank you so much, Ambassador Delattre. We are grateful for your words and your support. We greatly appreciate the association between human rights and the eradication of poverty at the service of dignity and mutual respect. Thank you. I am thrilled to introduce to you Mr. Donald Lee as the President of the International Committee for October 17th. Mr. Lee will share with us the message from the committee.
Excellencies, friends, 30 years ago, Father Joseph Rosinski launched his historic call to action against extreme poverty with his declaration that wherever men and women are condemned to live in extreme poverty, human rights are violated. This powerful message was groundbreaking because it asserted for the first time that poverty is not only about adequate income or meeting basic needs, but more importantly, it's also about being able to live a life in dignity and to enjoy basic human rights and freedoms. Joseph Rosinski believed and demonstrated through his work with poor communities that the way to break the vicious cycle of extreme poverty was to support people in their fight for their human rights. Today, the influence of his vision is self-evident in the implementation of the rights-based approach to poverty eradication and development that is a central plank of the United Nations Development Strategy. Every year since 1987, people from all walks of life around the world have come together on October 17 to observe the World Day for Overcoming Extreme Poverty. And this is an occasion to renew the commitment to answer the call to action and to pledge their solidarity with all people who strive to eradicate extreme poverty. This people-driven observance of a universal day for the eradication of poverty was recognized at the highest level when in 1992, the United Nations declared October 17th as the International Day for the Eradication of Poverty. Since then, the joint observance of the International Day for the Eradication of Poverty and the World Day for Overcoming Poverty has enabled people living in extreme poverty to break the silence of poverty and to act in solidarity with those who aspire to be their partners. The theme answering the call of October 17 to end poverty, a path towards peaceful and inclusive societies, reminds us that peace is the universal goal of all people, especially for people living in extreme poverty, who are forced to suffer the pain of exclusion, discrimination, injustice, and violence. It also reminds us that only a world free of poverty will provide the sustainable foundation for building peaceful and inclusive societies. It further reminds us of the importance of the values of dignity, solidarity, and voice, underscored in the call to action in the struggle to end poverty everywhere. These important values are embedded in the United Nations Agenda 2030, which recognizes the importance of mobilizing all stakeholders in the fight against poverty and promoting the full and active participation of people living in extreme poverty. However, we must ensure that world leaders live up to their commitments to end poverty in all its forms and to build peaceful societies. So today, I invite you to join us as we renew our commitment to answer the call to action and to stand in solidarity with all people around the world who strive to eradicate poverty. Today, we renew our pledge that no one will be left behind. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lee, and the International Committee for October 17th for imparting the wisdom and constant reminder on the roots of our work. To close the first part of the program, we will receive guiding words from Ms. Isabelle Pipat-Perrin.
Quel sens a la vie si près de nous, d'autres meurent dans l'indifférence?
We cannot but question what life means if people around us are dying. And notice, we cannot but question what life means if children deny themselves the right to dream to the point of saying, I never dream. What's the point? My dreams won't ever come true anyway. We cannot but question when mothers are forced to ask themselves, if I let social workers take the child I carry into care, as I have been asked, will they let me look after my other child who is old enough to go to school? Or will they take him away also? We cannot but question when young people are excluded from social and school programs because we are afraid of them, and some people are afraid of them because everybody has given up on them and on their families. We cannot but question, but when people who are fighting for justice on the behalf of those who live in poverty never really meet them. We may also question what life meant for Brother Joseph Wrzesniewski, who as a child grew up in extreme poverty and who, as a grown man, called people together on October 17, just 30 years ago today. At that time, he bore witness to millions and millions of children, women and fathers who have died from misery and hunger, to the poor of all times, still poor today, forever on the road, fleeing from place to place, despised and disgraced, and to the millions of young people who have no reason to believe or even to exist, and who vainly search for a future in this senseless world. What legacy has Joseph Brzezinski left us? What has he inspired us to do to help giving meaning to a world where the quest for security by those who have plenty sometimes exacerbates the insecurity of those who have nothing? Walking in his footsteps, millions of women, men, young people, children have thought to overcome their sense of guilt and the notion that extreme poverty is inevitable. They have refused to let their knowledge go to waste. They have found the strength to meet people in high places. Although they did not attend the same schools, they didn't have the same education as them. They have shown that these encounters, rooted in the hearts and minds of those who experience them, are not impossible. Such encounters took place in neighborhoods where people felt unsafe and neighborhoods where people were overprotected. They took place between people who were desperate for work and were made to feel useless by it, and people who were constantly overworked. They took place between people at the very bottom and people at the very top of the social ladder. Such encounters were aimed at upholding the rights of those who have nowhere else to go except to places nobody would consider acceptable for raising their children. By initiating these undreamt of encounters, people resisting poverty have experienced the pride of coming together as one, of being part of the same humanity, and of realizing they were able to generate unexpected changes. They have also raised hopes that new encounters will happen in the future. In this way, they have responded to the message that Brother Joseph Brzezinski sent out on that day of the first gathering which brought defenders of human rights together, when he said, "What about you? Are you going to pave the way for a new world where justice will prevail over profit and exploitation, where peace will prevail over war, where justice and love can finally reconcile?" Yes, this time has come for us to initiate these new encounters such as this on October 17 and on every day to increase the opportunities like that. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Pipa Perrin. Your message of consistency, tenacity, and faith are just 3 words that capture the spirit of the movement. Thank you. I'd like for us to pause for a moment as we take in the images and words we shared today. We shall now move into the second part of our program. It will be held in the United Nations Garden. Throughout, we have volunteers carrying lanterns. Please see yourselves downstairs exit to my left, your right, as we will begin in 15 minutes in the United Nations Garden. Thank you.